So let me get Kaali Priya come, and we're going to change computers.
Gets the computer set up. We can go ahead and start a little bit and say thank you, first of all, Swami, for inviting me to speak on this most auspicious day. It would take someone like him to get me up here, so thank you for that. And please be with me and asking the blessings of the Divine Mother in all her forms. And excuse any nervousness. This is a little new for me, so a little unfamiliar situation. But we'll get rolling along, I'm sure.
As we get this set up, anybody?
Oh, one more thing, Swami. I've got cards here that a lot of these videos of Seshananda doing worship to Holy Mother and talking about Holy Mother in a lecture are at this website, vedantavideo.com. So I'll leave these cards here.
Yeah, just one more thing is Dharmadas actually is one of the very few people who actually collected videos on a lot of our old swamis. So he was getting videos. So if you want Monday Media, you go to mondaymedia.com.
No, vedantavideo.com.
Vedantavideo.com. You'll find a lot of these old videos there of the old swamis speaking, and it's quite remarkable.
Thank you, Swami.
One second. Let me just set up here.
Mataji, are you taking some prasad with you?
Yeah.
I got it.
Oh, you're already.
Okay. So good to be here with you all. Recently, this last summer, I had the great benefit of successfully completing a journey to Mount Kailash, and certainly that wouldn't have happened without the grace of the Mother. And as I said, Swami asked me to give you a bit of a talk on that. So I'm going to give a little bit of information up front before I go into the journey, and then hopefully just share the journey with you, both visually and a bit of storytelling. So pilgrimage, as most of you know, in the Hindu religion is a practice. It's a journey of moral and spiritual significance. And the kinds of places we go to pilgrimage are often natural places like mountains, caves, bodies of water, lakes, rivers, and also shrines, the birth and death places of religious founders and saints. Of course, places like Belumat and Pune, for some of us who are also devotees of Vikas Iyengar. So, who is a pilgrim is kind of a question, because I myself am not a born Hindu. I don't really identify with any particular religion. I consider it more of a universalist, but have always been deeply drawn to pilgrimage once the awakenings, shall we say, started to come. So, straight to Mount Kailash. Swami mentioned how it's the premier place of pilgrimage. While I'm sure that it is on some levels, we know that really any place, if we go with our heart, our true heart, Kailash is inside of it. So any temple or place can offer that. But when we look at Mount Kailash, it's very interesting in that it is extremely important to four main religions in the region. From a Hindu perspective, and please excuse any errors, we consider it the abode of Shiva, right? And along with Shiva, Parvati is there with him. It's also considered the Sahasra Chakra, so the supreme consciousness is there. Mm-hmm. It's also considered the ultimate destination of the soul. So we're done with our work, we go there. And it's also considered the spiritual pillar of the physical world. that's true in the other three religions, in some ways, in that it's considered this axis mundi, this most important place where the physical and spiritual realms meet, that exists on the planet in physical form. The Bonpo people, pre-Buddhist, called the mountain Tisei, which means sky goddess. And they also consider it to be the 9-story swastika, and all of power resides there. All earthly power resides there. For the Buddhists, they feel like Demchok, the Supreme Bliss Buddha, lives there. And also there's a famous story about Milarepa, the Vajrayana Buddhist, and the Bonpo shaman, and they do their battle, and nobody's winning, and finally they decide whoever gets to the top of the mountain first wins. So the Bonpo shaman starts working his way up the mountain in some form or another, and Milarepa sits down and starts meditating, and finally right before the shaman gets to the top, Milarepa jumps on a sun ray and flies up to the top thanks to the sun, right? And wins the battle, but in good fair play, he gives the Bonpo shaman the offering of the mountain next door, so they could stay close together, So a battle, but not so much. And then finally the Jains. The Jain religion, they consider their Tirthankara received moksha, their first Tirthankara, and that happened in Ashtapad, which is a mountain right next door to Kailash. So we can see that, there's so much depth in the different faiths around this particular mountain. There's also some very interesting, more modern perspectives. The Theosophists felt that there was a lot going on, and the Rosicrucians have some stories around cosmic energy coming out. And the Russians actually, a few decades ago, were quite convinced that Kailash was a man-made pyramid and connected the different pyramid and cosmic spaces on the planet to connect. So just some interesting perspective there. Kailash is considered the source of 4 main rivers: the Ganga, the Brahmaputri, Indus, and the Sutlej. And then we can't really talk about Kailash without, it's the wrong picture, but it's okay. You don't see the lake, but Manas. Thank you. I can say it, but I'm speaking quickly. And that is, the lake that is almost of equal import, right? For many people that can't do the parikrama, the kora of the mountain, if they can get to the lake, then they're cleared of their sins, and it's the lake of the mind of Brahma. The lake next door is Rakshatal, and it's considered the dead lake. It's the lake of Ravana and the demons. And so, whereas as Manasovar is full of life and goodness, this is considered the other side of that story, shall we say. Parikrama is, so familiar to most of you in the room, I'm sure. It's a path of surrounding. It symbolizes prayer and surrender. And so doing the parikrama of Kailash is of import, as well as the parikrama of the lake. So I took many of these pictures, not all of them. This one I did take, and this was after we had circumambulated the lake. And I don't know if you can see, but for me, I see a very clear face on the side of the mountain here.
2 faces.
The eyes, the head,
Yeah.
the nose, the mouth, the chin. Right?
Another face facing it.
Yes, and so this is one example of almost every angle we looked at, we could find a face of Shiva. Yeah, it was very, very common, or not common, very often. In regards to, before I go on, in regards to parikrama, I think that there's a great story that relates to Holy Mother and this concept of that one day Parvati was talking to her two sons, and she said, I want you to circumambulate the universe. So, why did I go to Kailash? I have to tell a little bit of a backstory. I've been to India many times. I'm a student and devotee of both Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, as well as BKS Iyengar and the Iyengar family. So I go to Pune to study yoga. And on the first trip, it's in Maharashtra, and so the caves of Ellora are about a day away. And everybody says, oh, you must go. So we went. And I would say that this was probably the first really deep spiritual experience I had, was simply showing up there. I wasn't aware of what Kailash is. So now I'm just going to show you some photos. This is a basaltic flow, and what Ellora is a carving of Kailash and the surrounding areas, and with all the Devis and gods and goddesses and so forth. This is the top of part of the chariot. At the location of Ellora, you've got Buddhist caves, Hindu caves, and Jain caves, which seems appropriate when we think about the mythology related to Kailash, right? That it's not just one religion. This is the entrance to the Jain version of the Kailash carvings. They're phenomenal. There is a little hotel right outside of the grounds called Hotel Kailash. And from there you can look up and you can see, if you look closely, there's some caves in here, but we've got this river and you fall up, and I thought, I want to go up there. I want to see what's up there. And lo and behold, there's some beautiful small caves. To me, this cave is very much a living cave, and it turned out to be a cave to the Mother. And very close to that cave was a cave to Ganapati. So this experience, this is inside the larger caves. This is Annapurna. And this is one of hundreds of Shivalingas, small little caves with carvings of the Sach. So for me, I look at these images and it almost makes me weep. So, this is the Buddhist portion. The Buddhist caves are much simpler and often very deep, where you can sit and know that the monks had been in their cells. So, Ellora was the beginning. Kashi came next, right? So, it's another place you go and there you are, right? Kashi, it was probably my first experience of seeing pilgrims do their thing, because I didn't really know what it was I was trying to do. I was simply listening. And we see pilgrims praying in the Ganga. And this was one photo I took that struck me a lot, because there was this big massive bowl. You can see that there's the offerings, the trash, the ashes from the ghat, and this bowl. And at that time, I kind of felt like I was that bowl, and glad to be there. But it was very moving. It was very, altering. And then, of course, in the evenings, there's the artis, and we have Annapurna and Shiva there. The third place, and then I will get to Kailash very soon, is that I was lucky enough to go down into the Bangalore area to a temple of Annapurna called Hornadu. And I just happened to show up that night on the Festival of Lights and had darshan of Annapurna, and nothing has been the same since. So I feel like she is absolutely responsible, very much like Holy Mother, in helping this process along. So now, these are the hills. This is in Annapurna Sanctuary. So Swami mentioned that often getting to Kailash isn't easy. And we both have a story around that. In 2011, I made my first attempt. it was the same year that Swami ended up making his first attempt. I got to Hong Kong and got an email saying that the Chinese had shut the border. But there was still a chance. So off to Kathmandu I went, and after about 3 or 4 days, it was very clear that there was no going to Kailash. And I had a limited amount of time, and so in hindsight, it doesn't surprise me that Annapurna said, no, you're not going to Kailash, you're coming up to my sanctuary. And I spent a couple weeks up in Annapurna's sanctuary with these kinds of sites. So it didn't feel like a loss, but it wasn't the plan, right? And that's often how pilgrimage goes. So that was 2011. I came home, and I had kind of put Kailash out of my mind. For the next number of years, I went to India to study and went on some solo pilgrimages, went to Bday and other places. They were difficult years, and I felt like something was missing, but I didn't know what it was. And so then we fast forward to 2016 and the national election. So, whatever side you stand on that fence, these are difficult times, and that was a concerning and changing moment in our country and really the world. I decided to participate in the DC March, and I went to DC that January, and was deeply moved by the energy there, for sure. And so my feelings of concern for humanity, for myself, trying to understand what to do, was very present. And then the voice came, you have to go to Kailash. And it's one of those voices that it doesn't go away, it's just there. And, I'm a yoga teacher and a massage therapist. I'm not independently wealthy, and this is not an inexpensive trip ever to go to India, but especially to Kailash. So it wasn't something quick and easy to say yes to, but I realized that I didn't have a choice. So I reached out, I did what I needed to do, and lo and behold, the next journey began. It started by going to Toronto. These are pictures of flowers in Toronto in May. I have a mantra sadhana Sanskrit teacher there, who's a Jyotishi. And so on the way to Kailash, I did 7 days with 40 people studying mantra sadhana and Jyotish. And it was an amazing start and clarification. It was 7 days of intense mantra sadhana. Then, so this is some of the viewing in Toronto, and here we are, right? Then I got on a train from Toronto to New York. This is looking up the river from Niagara. This is looking down. I didn't get to see the falls, but here's a crossing of the border and into the States. My godchildren live in New Paltz, which is very close to Ridgely. And so I've been to New York, I think 18 times in the last 5 or 6 years, and almost always I go for darshan and sitting at Ridgely. So I was able to go there and meditate and ask for the blessings of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, spend some time connecting with Vivekananda, try to get it clear on purpose, and also sitting with these pilgrims and imagining what they must have gone through and how they went about their pilgrimages and seeking the inspiration. And it came. From New York to Kathmandu. Now, I didn't mention that 3 weeks prior to leaving for the pilgrimage, I came down with a very bad injury. So I was in probably some of the most excruciating neck, shoulder pain I'd been in ever. Originally, I had planned on going back up to Annapurna Sanctuary and get my legs on before I went to Kailash. So I had a plan. By the time I got to Kathmandu, I knew that I needed to rest and heal. So I found, it found me, Hotel Dream City, in the heart of Tamil, and that's where I stayed for a long time. I was advised to get some Ayurvedic treatment. So I reached out to some Ayurvedic doctors. There was a kind of a formal doctor, and then there was more of a wild card Ayurvedic tantric mountain healer. And in good form, that's where I ended up, right? And he ended up being a Nadi Jyotishi and a very profound healer. And after he gave me a consultation, he told me I had to come back to do nighttime ritual and he would help me, and I had to kind of listen to the voice and trust. It was a little scary, to be honest with you, and I've been in some interesting situations. So the next night, on Tuesday, which is Ganesh's day, I went back and spent well into the middle of the night doing puja and ritual to help clear some karma and curses that were laid upon me. After that, and I was required to stay the night at the facility, and they were a lovely lady, wife, and she fed me. Afterwards, I was laying in my room and I lit 2 candles. This one, a tiny bit of the match fell into the candle. That's as bright as that candle got. This one was pure. And I meditated for quite some time on the impact of when we're sullied, that our light is diminished, but it never goes out. And if we can get clean, then look at the brilliance of that light. Right? So it was a moment. So I had some time, since I wasn't going up to Annapurna Sanctuary. I did some darshan, pilgrimage, in the Kathmandu Valley. This is a very old and important temple called Shankhu Bhairavi, and it's one of the oldest, most important of those Bhairav temples. You can't see, but there was a very tall roof, and it all came down in the earthquake, but still it was a functioning temple. This is in Durbar Square in Kathmandu, Kaali Bhairav. This is outside of a Kali temple in Bhaktapur. While out in that region, Shiva, Parvati, Ganesh, this temple, Shamanunda, Chandishwari, is probably one of the most, how many times can you see the most, but we go to these temples and they affect us so deeply. These are obviously enlarged photos, but Ganapati, Hanuman. This is a supine Vishnu. Next on that little journey was to this Tibetan monastery called Namo Buddha. One of the ideas I had when I decided to go to Kailash this time, because it wasn't feeling like it was just for me, was to take prayer flags and offer my friends to sign their names, write their prayers, whatever. And I ended up with many flags and I think over 180 people with different prayers. So this, on the way to hang the prayer flags, there was a little bit of a rainstorm, so I found a friend to hang out with and spin the prayer wheels. But here is the place where they often hang their prayer flags, and you can see it just goes on and on. So these are a couple prayers of friends of mine. On the way home from there, we stopped in my driver's hometown. This is a building that used to be lived in, but was too damaged from the earthquake. But I was waiting for him while he went and got a sack of potatoes, and I walked up into, you can see the pictures by the door, and you can see the prayers of the people. And these kinds of images, they're just so profound. In Kathmandu, we've got Bodhanath, right? And it just so happened that a good friend of mine was trekking up in the mountains, and we got to spend about a half a day together. Finally, it's time to go to Kailash. Pashputina. As a considered non-Hindu, I'm not allowed into these temples. But we did do Shiva Puja on the outside, right? So this is a group of 40 Indians and myself doing puja. And now it's time to go. So this group, we were leaving Kathmandu, flying to Nepalganj, then getting in a smaller plane, flying up to Simacot, getting in a helicopter, going to Hilsa, getting in a car, driving to the mountain and walking around the mountain. That was the planned journey. Oops. So, we got to Nepalganj. And then we proceeded to be stuck there for 4 days at 105 degrees in an unair-conditioned hotel due to both political, mechanical, and weather issues. The third day we were sitting around waiting to see if we were going to get on the plane, I started thinking, well, let me go explore Nepalganj. It's a very weird place. And it just so happened that there was a movie theater within walking distance showing Wonder Woman. And I have to tell you, nobody else at home had seen Wonder Woman yet. So I went and saw Wonder Woman as I walked around Nepalganj and felt very empowered. For sure, this is going to happen, right? Well, the fourth day, we get to the airport in Nepalganj and maybe 5 o'clock in the morning. By 3 o'clock, we're on the tarmac, about to get on a plane. Half the people are on the plane. They stop, they make people get off the plane, and they say, no, the weather won't let you go. You can't go. And at that point, my voice said, oh, this isn't happening. Uh-oh. But I wasn't really ready to just give it up. So almost, I would imagine in India, any airport has a Ganesha temple. At least anyone I've been in. So I went and I sat with Ganesha and prayed and said, what do I do? This isn't happening, but this can't be happening. And Ganesha said, go back to Kathmandu. So I talked to the scout, I had him call the organizer, and I was back in Kathmandu by 6 o'clock that night. And when I had called the organizer, I said, I think you've got some trips to Lhasa. I don't even know if it could work, but I'm not giving up. The next day, he put me in the Lhasa group. I had to extend my visa for 3 weeks. I had to buy a new ticket home, and I had to house myself for an additional 3.5 weeks. So what was supposed to be a 5-week trip now turned into over a 2-month trip. Again, as a self-employed person, right? So I got the visa, I prayed to Ganesha, and I found some puppies to love on, because by this time I was getting quite lonely too. Most of this time I'm by myself, yeah, except for my lovely driver. So I've got 3.5 weeks, and the next day after I make that decision, I come down quite sick. And I'm like, what do I do? So I go to Pokhara. Pokhara is kind of an escape place, and I find lizards and fresh lime soda and very good espresso. But that only goes so far, right? And I knew that something else was, now I'm in Pokhara, which is really the lap of Annapurna, right? Again, the Pokhara is surrounded by the Annapurna mountains, and I keep coming back to Annapurna. So as I'm walking home, lo and behold, Ayurvedic Health Home. I go in, I see the doctor. The next day I go in for 7 days Panchakarma. I needed it, I was sick. And I needed somebody to feed me and love me and take care of me. And I ended up being the only person in the facility until the 6th day of the journey. So you see how welcome they are. Miss Kim, this is my bed. They hang water in the windows for various reasons. If you look over across, you can see a stupa up on the hill. That's the World Peace Stupa. So my view was that, okay? World Peace Stupa. So on the 7th day, it happened to be my 49th birthday. So I walked out of Ayurvedic Health, healthy, happy. I went up to the stupa, found some dogs, some more espresso, but this is my birthday party, right? And again, hung prayer flags. These are the prayers of my family. Time to go back to Kathmandu, straight to the Ganesha temple. Please, Ganesha, please, can we make the third time the charm? Back to the map. This new trip, we go Kathmandu, Lhasa, you see the difference there, and drive across the Tibetan plateau. It's me and 11 people of Gujarati descent that hold foreign passports. So me and them. We're flying to Lhasa, and there we have Mount Everest. So we got a darshan on the top of the mountain, and now we're in Lhasa, and the knowingness of the Portola Palace. I'll be honest, I didn't want to go to Lhasa. I had tried two different ways. I didn't want to deal with what would come up. Of course, I'm happy it did now. But when I got to Lhasa, I felt the energy and was quite upset. I knew the next day that we had tickets to go in and see the Portola Palace, but that the local peoples, the native peoples, they didn't have such rights, and it bothered me a lot. So that, as soon as we got to the hotel, I walked down Lhasa Boulevard and circumambulated the Portola Palace with the Tibetan people. This is their chode pits, and they're all around the monastery. Across from the Portola Palace is this monument. This is the monument that represents the peaceful liberation of the People's Republic, or of Tibet, which is now China. So this is the Chinese monument to represent how it was peacefully liberated. So you might imagine there's some emotion going on throughout the process. This is our vehicle that we traveled in. It was quite comfy. So we get on the road, we leave Lhasa. One of the best berries I've ever had in the world, right there. I don't know what they called it, but it was sure yummy. The next day, we go to the Tashi Monastery, which is more commonly known as the monastery for the Panchen Lama. So if you know anything of the history between the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama, and I won't get into that, let me just say that I almost felt more affected by being in this monastery than in the Portola Palace. The energy, the bhavana, the mood was so profound. We were not allowed to take photos except for in one shrine, so I did so and paid so I could do so, just to give people a sense. So these are, this is the youngest one is the last Panchen Lama, and the previous ones, and so whether in here or in the Portola Palace, you can see the depth of these shrines. After we leave Shigatse, which is where the Panchen Lama Palace is, we head to the north base camp of Everest. Right when we got there, this was the only snap I got of the top, right? And these are my fellow pilgrims. So now we're at the base camp, and this is all of us. And these are my guides, our guides, and then the rest are pilgrims. And we had a young one, Ishwari. She is 11 or 12. This is the other view from looking the other way. You can see this is all glacial till. It's very desolate. So very close to that base camp was the first small monastery. Rangpu Monastery is said to be where Padmasambhava meditated for 6 years, 6 months, and 6 days. This is inside the cave. I can't really express the mood and the feeling from these places, but it was a very profound experience to just be in that space. And outside, as we were walking back to our vehicle, we've got a couple of local Tibetan ladies, and I just thought it would be nice for you to get a sense of of them. Driving away from Mount Everest, you see this wild road, and the terrain of the Tibetan Plateau is so vast and up and down, and so there's kind of the world there. And these are things that, along the way we would stop for restroom breaks and find Om Mani Padme Hum stones and various symbols. This is an example of a rest stop where we would have our lunch. Okay, so this isn't showing real well, but I want to share this next experience. These next 3 photos, we're in the vehicle, we're getting closer to Kailash, and all of a sudden, and again, you can't see real well, so I apologize, but there's this row of mountains down here. Swami? I'll do it. So I want to ask you to just simply look across here, and in particular at that mountain. And now you have a bit of a closer view.
Oh, yeah. I see the face, yeah.
And you tell me, who do you see there?
Yeah.
Ganapati. Every person in the van had darshan of Ganapati. People were crying. We got out of the vehicle. It's one of those things that I think happens when you're with a group and it's a moment, like the clouds could have been there and other people saw Shiva and Parvati behind, but for me, this Ganapati was so real and evident and a good sign, huh? So this idea of pilgrimage, again, like, okay, I'm on my way to Kailash, but I just got to see Ganapati, and that would have been enough, to be honest with you. The first view of Kailash, again, awe, tears. The lake, you've seen this, okay. So we're in darshan. Who is this? Swami Swahanandaji. Swami Swahanandaji is my guru in this lineage. And when on pilgrimage, often, we take our special little things. So one of the things I took with me was a print of Swami Swahanandaji's feet that's folded in this little plastic. And I thought, okay, it's the first day of the Kora. Who's coming with me? Who's going to be on my body today? And Swami Swahanandaji said, me, please. And so his feet were on my heart. And we started, this is the beginning place of the Kora. There you see Mount Kailash. And this is where we start to walk through. Saying prayers. Every now and then I let somebody take a photo. And now the walk has begun. This is kind of the first close view. I'm not going to get into the details of the faces and the this and that. It's Kailash. And just go with that. You see people living out there, right? Doing their lives. This is a river that eventually we realize is coming down from Kailash. A horse and her foal. We've been warned about wild dogs. I don't know that this was a wild dog, but it was a very large dog. And it really liked chasing the yaks. Here we have Ishwari and her mom. Those are the only 2 that decided to take the ponies. And it was a good decision for them. So it was just fun to get Ishwari. She was very happy with herself. At the end of that day, we get to Dirapuk. Dirapuk is a monastery, again with a main focus to Padmasambhava. So I decide to go over there, get a little closer, and sit on the steps. So if you kind of look to see where you would enter the monastery, I sat there, and the view from there is Kailash. So we can only imagine how many prayers have been happening there and turns of the wheel. So the reason these next 3 snaps, and this is probably the most famous view of Kailash, I believe it's the south face, is there's the big view. Here's the base. Some people climb up there to get as close as they can to touch the feet of Kailash, but this is also considered the source of the Ganga. So here we see the Ganga coming down, and yeah, so there's the source. There's the water. Glacial glacial water, but it tastes wonderful and feels amazing. The yaks are quite interesting. The Tibetans love their dogs. The dogs are everywhere and they treat them very well. This was the second day. We were starting on our way to Domla Pass, and this couple is a young man. I would guess he's maybe 18 or 20 with his grandmother. I don't know what to say. It was a beautiful thing to walk with them. As we're walking up, this is where we came from. So we're working our way to the top peak. Another dog just joins us. They're just out there. And these are our guides. As we start to approach the pass, I hope it wasn't disrespectful, but I think it's worth and valuable to show. This is a Tibetan woman, and you can see that the path here is very muddy and wet. And she's doing prostrations all the way around the mountain, because that is the kind of preferred approach by the Tibetan people. So she's on these kinds of rocks, getting down to do her prostrations. Now we're starting to approach the top. It's 18,600 feet, a little high. And it is slathered with prayer flags. So again, I break out the prayer flags. On this day, it's one of my teachers, Mary Obendorfer's birthday. So I'm so happy. And she had signed some of the flags, and a friend's father had recently passed, so I put flags up for him. And this is an example of a flag where I invited people to sign their name. And this is a very good friend of mine, and one of her messages that I appreciated and was happy to hang along with all the other thousands of prayers. Peace and healing within, between, and among. I'm happy. I'm really, really happy. Behind me is Ganesh Kund. It's the lake of Ganesha. The water, the picture doesn't do it justice. The color of the water is amazing. Here's the Tibetan people taking a little tea break after getting past the pass. And it was very interesting and wonderful to see how they made it a celebration, often is the way they do in India. It's both a party and a such. And now this is on the way out of Kailash, and it felt like there were spirits all over the hills, ushering us with good wishes and protection. This is a pair of paddles that one of the pilgrims put aside to maybe mark the spot where it was the last prostration, and who knows how long they would stay there, and then they would go back and pick them up and keep at it, because it takes a little while to prostrate around the mountain. So that young man and his grandmother, there they are with the rest of this family. So clearly they had the other people had come from the other side to meet them here, because I didn't see these children or these other people on the path. But they did the last leg together. And these are young children, and you can see the walking stick. This woman was quite crippled. She still walked all the way out. On the way out, there was a large group of nuns. They were quite jovial and happy, and this is the stream alongside where we were walking, and the Padmi stones. And this is the very end of the Kora, the place where they offer their prayers in different ways. So we didn't get to do the puja before we did Kailash. Normally, you get to the lake, you do Shiva puja, and then you do the parikrama. But there were visa issues for the pujari, so it got delayed. So instead of starting on June 30th, the blessing is that we start parikrama with Swami Swahanandaji's birthday, and I had forgotten. I almost broke down, because the significance of realizing how much he was with me and how much the mother was with me and how much all of the sages, the support that I clearly didn't do it on my own, but that he was with me that day was just so huge. So we went back to the lake. This is the last monastery, again, Padmasambhava. And this is considered his footprint. These are his two consorts, right? And he was kind of run out of Tibet because he didn't really go along with the Buddhist program after he taught them Buddhism, and then they wanted him to kind of do things differently. So he was his own guy, right? He did his things. He had his own vision. I was able to sit in that cave by myself for a good 45 minutes. Just such an amazing experience meditating there. And this is after Shiva Puja, and though I don't have a very serene look on my face, the fact is the sun was bright and a lot had happened. So there we are at the end. We're on our way to leave the region. You see Kailash in the background. This was the last time we got to see the mountain. And then we head back and we